Hey Mustangs, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the body systems. So we're going to take a look at how the body's organized, why it's organized the way it is, and an introduction to the nervous system, the basics for the nervous system in order to understand what the nervous system does and its big role, major role for the body. Now there's 12 major body systems altogether. In this class we're going to be focusing more deeply on the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. So let's go ahead and take a look at how the body is organized in order to better understand why our body has these different systems that work together as one for the entire organism. So first we have humans are multicellular organisms. So we have 75 to 100 trillion cells that make up our body, and with all those cells they have to work together. Cells must work together in order for a multicellular organism to exist in harmony, I guess is the best way to say it. If even one of those cells doesn't work for the benefit of the entire organism, it causes a problem. That's what cancer is. So a cancer is when one cell basically becomes selfish, no pun intended. It doesn't care about the other cells anymore. It starts taking oxygen and nutrients for itself, which kills the surrounding cells. And it makes copies of itself, of course. So these 75 to 100 trillion cells must work together in order to help the organism stay alive and function. Now, the way the body is organized, cells, this is way back at the beginning of the year, so cells organized into tissues, tissues into organs, organs into organ systems, and then organ system into the organism. So we have about 300 different types of cells that make up our body. 4 different types of tissues, many major organs, 12 major organ systems, and then finally the organism. So if we take a look here, this is kind of the basics of how it's set up here. Starting from the cell, we know that atoms come together to make molecules, and then we can even add more in here. There's molecules which make macromolecules, which make organelles, which then make the cell. But starting from this level, cells of certain types come together to make tissues. Tissues come together to build organs. Organs come together to build organ systems, where many organs work together as one single system, as one single functioning unit to accomplish a task. And then all the organ systems of the body, if you can think of them like digestive system, circulatory system, respiratory system, they work together as the entire organism. Now, cell differentiation. In order to have all these different cells, with 75 to 100 trillion cells, there has to be some way to organize them and give them different jobs so that each one knows what it's supposed to be doing. So each cell is basically assigned a task. And we learned about cell differentiation earlier in the year. All of your cells in your body have the exact same DNA instructions, but certain parts of those instructions get turned on or off during gene expression, and that causes cells to develop into certain types of cells. So with the 300 different types of cells, they all have the same DNA instructions. And you look here, here's a neuron, and you can see it looks and it's going to behave different, and we learned about those in the previous video. It's going to behave differently from other cells. Here's a muscle cell. Here is some I think they're either intestine or liver cells. Okay, so these different cells you see here, they look and behave differently, even though they have the same DNA instructions, and that's what cell differentiation was. So certain parts during gene expression are going to get turned off, some permanently, if you remember, during methylation. So depending on how methylated a gene is, it's going to actually cause it to either be turned off completely or temporarily. There's other different things as well, but methylation is something you should remember about how genes can be regulated and turned off. And so that's how you can get all these different types of cells. Now, stem cells are what cells are going to come from. So they're going to differentiate from stem cells. So stem cells are cells that can become just about any type of cell in the body. So these cells here from the bone marrow can become muscle cells, nerve cells, red blood cells. They just have to have certain instructions turned on or off in order to become one of the 300 different types of cells that make up our body. Another important thing to understand about how the body is organized into systems is that the body has to maintain homeostasis. So with homeostasis, it's maintaining constant or near constant conditions despite the outside. So whatever's going on outside the organism, it doesn't matter. The internal conditions are tried to be maintained at a certain level. And the reason for that, all the different chemical reactions and stuff that goes on inside your body, there has to be a certain pH, there has to be a certain temperature. So the internal conditions have to be kept at constant or near constant conditions for most of the things that are going on inside your body. So we call that homeostasis, keeping the inside of the body at constant or near constant conditions, regardless of what's going on the outside. Now, the two most important systems that are involved in this, involved in maintaining homeostasis, keeping that balance inside the body, is the nervous system and the endocrine system. So the nervous system is the big boss. So this is like the president. It's the number one in charge. And the endocrine is kind of like the vice president. It's the one that works with the nervous system in order to keep things and maintain homeostasis. So some examples of homeostasis. One of the biggest ones that students usually know is temperature. So we all know that humans keep a temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it gets too hot, we sweat in order to cool ourselves back down to 98.6. If our temperature starts to drop below 98.6, we shiver, and that shivering creates heat, and that heat warms up our body back up to 98.6 if we're lucky. Water. So there's a certain amount of water we try to maintain in the blood. If there's too much water in the blood, you get the feeling that you have to go pee. So you actually filter out the excess water into your urine in order to get rid of the extra water and maintain homeostasis, a certain level of water in the blood at all times. Now, if you drop below homeostasis for water, so if you have less water in your blood than you should, you get that feeling of being thirsty. And then you drink water, it brings it back up to the level of homeostasis. And then sugar is another one, and just about everything that goes into your body has some level of homeostasis for a certain level of where it's supposed to be at. So for sugar, if you don't have enough sugar being monitored in your body, then you feel hungry and you want to eat and get more sugar. If you have too much sugar, that's also a bad thing. So you might actually not feel hungry and kind of be disgusted by food, stuff like that. So if you have too much sugar in the blood, and you might even feel hyper and then tired from having too much sugar, you have that sugar crash and all that stuff. So there's a certain amount of sugar that you should have in your body at all times, and it's constantly regulated in order to keep homeostasis for it. Now, the nervous system. So this is the first body system that we're going to be taking a close look at. You already looked at the neurons, the cells that actually make up the nervous system. Here we're looking at what its job is. So the function of the nervous system is to control and coordinate the other body systems. So it's the big boss in charge, monitoring all the other body systems. And as part of controlling and coordinating the other body systems, it's watching them in order to maintain homeostasis of the body for different things, in order to respond to internal and external conditions, things that are changing inside the body, things that happen outside the body. And it's also a communication system. That's really important right there. So the nervous system is a way of communicating throughout the body. If you think about it, those 75 to 100 trillion cells have to be able to tell each other what's going on. And the nervous system is one way. The endocrine system is going to be another, but the nervous system is the major way of how the cells are going to communicate with each other throughout the entire body. The neurons are the cells that make up the nervous system, so that's just the special name for the cells of the nervous system. They're called neurons, and they are very special. They have a very unique structure to them because they have to conduct electric signals through the body. So when you look at a neuron, as they send and receive signals, they're called nerve impulses. The neuron carries electricity through it, but it's chemical. So there's chemical signals sent in between. So through the neuron, you have an electric signal, and then as soon as it gets to the axon terminals, it turns into a chemical signal we call neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters float across the synapse, hit the receptors on the dendrite of the next neuron, and then start the next signal. A resting potential, this is what we're going to get to in detail in class. Resting potential is when a neuron is not sending an electric signal, so no information is being sent. An action potential, that's what we call an electric signal being sent through a neuron. We call that an action potential. All right, so here are the quick review of the parts of the neurons. You have the dendrites, which pick up the signal and turn it to an electric signal. You have the nucleus, you have the cell body, the axons, which carry the electric signal towards the next neuron, the myelin sheaths, which insulate and speed up the electric signal, the axon terminals, which change the electric signal into a chemical signal called neurotransmitters, and then the synapse, the gap between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of the next, and that's where the neurotransmitters will float across, and they'll hit the receptors on the dendrite of the next neuron and start an electric signal through that one. Now, there's 3 types of neurons. So if you were to take all the neurons that make up the body, every single neuron that makes up the entire body, you would be able to divide them into 3 major groups. The first is the sensory neurons. Now the trick here is the sensory neurons are involved in your senses. If you think about what your senses do, they gather information. So sensory neurons gather information and send that information to the brain. Sensory neurons don't know what's going on. They just gather information and send it to the brain. That is the job of sensory neurons. So again, sensory neurons, your senses. So you have sensory neurons in your eyes, nose, ears, mouth, and skin. I was trying to think of the 5th one for a second there. You have these sensory neurons that are going to gather information and send the information to your brain. So sensory senses and also sensory send. So all sensory neurons send information to the brain. Then you have interneurons. Interneurons interpret information. That is what your brain is made out of. So when you look at this picture of the brain here, you're actually looking at interneurons. You can't see the individual interneurons here, but if you were to zoom in, you'd be able to find all the individual interneurons. So interneurons are what make up the brain. So the sensory neurons send the information to the brain. Once that information gets there, the interneurons figure out what's going on and make a decision on what to do next. And then finally, the motor neurons, so motor for movement. Most motor neurons are going to cause movement, a response to a stimulus of some kind. So motor neurons carry information away from the brain. So once the interneurons make a decision about something, the information is sent through motor neurons out to the body, and most motor neurons will connect to muscles. Some motor neurons lead to glands and stuff like that as well. So once a decision has been made, that information gets sent through motor neurons out to the brain in order to cause something to happen. So with motor neurons, it's going to cause something to happen. So kind of a simplified picture here. So sensory neurons send information to the brain. Motor neurons carry information away from the brain. And of course, the brain itself is made out of interneurons. Okay, so sensory again to the brain, motor neurons away from the brain.